Okay, Spellmonger, Book 9, Shadowmage. Before I get into this, though, I'd just like to thank Terry Mancor for highlighting me in his recent Facebook post. Something I've been meaning to do for a while, but I've been saying off Facebook so I can write, is to promote this gentleman's review of the series. He makes some very salient points, and I love his delivery. I suppose someone has to. I've always felt I come across as a bit stiff in these videos, or he's done the first 6 or 7 books now. Check him out. That is an incredibly kind thing, and I've always felt that a lot of my reviews don't tend to get the series half the credit it deserves, but, I super appreciate the call out. Thank you. In any case, Shadowmage. This is another Tyndall and Rondell book, and the story is mostly about them and their adventures in Ultramar. This is the rebellious part of one of the Duchy of, I think, Alshar. Someone can correct me on that if I'm wrong. Sometimes the names run together. But the book gets the title from the people that they meet in the first few chapters of this book, Gatina and Adipal, who are both shadow mages, and they end up being important supporting characters for Tyndall and Rondell respectively. Gatina's contribution basically doing a caveman wedding to Rondell, bashing him over the head and saying, "We're gonna get married now." I mean, it was literally basically like that, and I actually kind of liked that. It does show the guy doesn't always have to be the one pursuing the woman, sometimes it's the other way around. I would say that it's a cute relationship, but it's very teenage infatuation. Not that that's a bad thing, that's totally what it should be. But yeah, back onto the main plot. Basically Tyndall and Rondell, because of the events that happened in their last outing, had set themselves up to take down this group called the Brotherhood of the Rat, which is just this one criminal organization that has a lot of power. So, think the Yakuza or something like that. With sometimes the tacit endorsement of the nobility. So, again, like the Yakuza. And the way they go about this type of thing tends to be very, it's very systematic. They try to identify the Brotherhood's weaknesses and try and attack them there. They have a pretty ingenious solution in the end to how they finally deal with them. So, that's kind of like the story. If I was going to say that the theme or the plot, or I don't know what you'd want to call it, of the book is more than anything else, it's how do you deal with your friendships evolving with other relationships. I've mentioned Gatina and how she kind of knocks Rondell over the head. And a lot of the emotional weight in this book is based on, comes from that relationship and how that affects both Rondell and Tyndall. Again, it's, what do you do when your, basically brother starts having, how do you deal with the fact that your best friend will eventually move on and kind of get a wife? Do you let that be the thing that splits you apart so you no longer see each other, or do you try and make that work? Or, again, that's just sort of the, for lack of a better word, theme, I guess, of the book. I would say the main overarching theme of a lot of it seems to be about how their dynamic changes as they get older, which does seem to be a consistent theme throughout this entire series, if I haven't people mature over time and everything. And I would say that theme is kind of in the forefront of this book, and it's handled very well. Several other important developments, I would say, is that a nominal villain from the last 2 books, Lady Mask, shows up, and it turns out that she's not that bad of a person. I mean, she's kind of an arrogant, vain narcissist, but she's not evil, if that makes sense.
Now, instead of
committing war crimes,
let's discuss healthier ways to get back at Daddy.
Who wants to be the best like no one ever was, but she's not necessarily evil. And I'm pretty sure she comes back up a few times with, I think particularly Tyndall has a good rapport with her in later books. And the climax of this book is actually quite great. It's a very satisfying dragon fight. Again, dragons are interesting in this series because they're basically immune to magic. And a lot of the, how do you beat something like that is it's a lot of using magic indirectly, sort of ways. There does seem to be like a common thread of attack the throat, because whereas they're basically impervious, they still have to breathe. How I think it was Tyndall who actually kills the dragon in the end of this one works is actually, I don't know, I thought it was cool. They basically melted down a bunch of lead and stuck it in its throat, which, it's like, yeah, that would totally kill the thing. It's like, yeah, I guess the thing is invincible, but, they do still have to breathe, so, Also, at the end of this book, there's something called the Spellmonger's Yule. This is kind of like a novella or a shorter story in which we get introduced to probably one of my favorite characters in the series, Lelastian. She's an Alka-Alon who doesn't seem to actually like Alka-Alon that much. And that's kind of an interesting dynamic. She was one of the first people to study humans when they first showed up on Calidor, and as such has like a deep sort of reverence for the human nature and like human customs, and she's actually like a literal MD. Yeah, I think at this point you should probably have been able to figure this one out, but I'm just gonna say it flat out at this point in the series. The humans on Calidor are from Earth, and there's a lot of little things that show that will lead you to that conclusion by this point. But like, if you don't figure it out after the conversation with her, I don't think you are ever going to figure it out unless you were just sort of flat out told. And I think Lelastian does a good job of pointing out this, like, one... In fantasy, elves are kind of taken as sort of above and ahead of humans in some sort of ways. But if we were to look at elves from our modern society, we'd think they were kind of barbaric, for lack of a better term. Even with, like, their impressive magic, I'm pretty sure, like, the humans on Calidor were like, yeah, we could probably take them during that initial colonization sort of thing. And I do appreciate that kind of thing, because it does kind of show that as technology advances, and there are... Like, one of the common things I've noticed in this series is that problems get fixed in basically the same way problems get fixed in our real world, only they use magic and we use technology. But there's a problem, people use reason to solve that problem. That might cause other problems down the road, but you can use reason to solve those problems as well. And I feel like a frank admission that, like, a culture that relies on technological sophistication is just as or it can be just as powerful as one that relies on magic in this world. And I appreciated that. But yeah, Lelastian, she's a Alka-Alon rebel who doesn't really seem to like the Alka-Alon. Or an elf that kind of thinks elves are shitheads. And, the impotence for this was was the climax for Enchanter, when Alia basically went catatonic, and a lot of the talk is about, a lot of the talk Lelastian has about this sort of thing is mostly about fixing that. Like I said, she's an MD. So yeah, those are my kind of thoughts on this book. It's got effective themes that are well told, and again continues the kind of trademark style at this point that this feels like Tyndall and Rondell's story, not a side story, if that makes sense. I don't think any other author I've ever read has been able to match that kind of that feeling that every character is the hero of their own story. And this is, again, a good book in showing why. I can't really explain why so much as just say, well, just read this and the Spellmonger Apprentice series, and you'll see what I mean when I say everyone feels like their own hero.